With winter upon us and the water temperatures being very cold, today I'm going to take you through some essential tips that I've picked up the last couple of years to get the most out of your peg in the winter months on commercials. Today I've come up to the very famous Tunnel Barn Farm. I've sat on peg 23 on extension. I've sat here because I know it's a very good area, but the temperature is really low. We've got a strong northeasterly wind, so I'm not expecting to catch hundreds of fish, but I am going to do my best to try and catch you a few. First of all, I'm going to take you through my setup. Today I'm using the signature S36 seat box. This is a great bit of kit. Really comfy, really sturdy, and a lot of room to store all your bits and bobs. When you come into venues like this at this time of year, with the temperatures that we're getting, you really don't want to be uncomfy. You want to put your box down and be nice and comfy for the full 5 hours. We've got some matching side trays. I've got a big signature side tray on my left and a big signature side tray on my right. I like to use 2 side trays because I like to keep all my bait on my left and then all my bits and bobs, my hook length boxes, my disgorger, my shot, my line on the right hand one. Today we're just going to use maggots, so it seems like a bit of an overkill, but on other days we might have pellets, we might have ground bait, we might have bread, so a nice big wide Signature Pro side tray is really what I like to use. On the right I use a slightly slimmer tray because I don't need quite as much room. I've just got all my bits and bobs on my right. Keep nets. This time of year the rules at Tunnel Barn allow you to go to over £100 with 2 keep nets, and it's very rare that you're going to catch over £100 in these temperatures, so today I've just put 2 keep nets in, which should be adequate. My landing net, I've just got it to hand. This time of year every single fish is going to be crucial, so if you do get an opportunity to net a fish quickly, to have your landing net to hand is really important. The last bit of kit that's important for me is a double pole sock. I like to keep my pole nice and secure and make sure I know I've got it to hand at all times. The double pole sock allows me to break the pole down in half and have 2 sections in the pole socks at the same time. But the most important thing about the setup is that it's quick, it's really efficient. There's nothing here that I don't need, which allows you to sit down, put your gear down on your pallet and allow yourself more time to plumb up, get a feel for your peg, which I'll touch on just a little bit more in a minute. First thing I've done is gone and put my coat on. This wind today really is making it feel cold. Now we're going to start our session fishing across. Now in my opinion, on lakes like Tunnel Barn, snake style lakes, fishing across is definitely the most consistent line for most people. It's your banker line. So I like to start across a lot of the time. A lot of people fish short to start with, but it really is the most consistent line. Now, the most important thing about when fishing across is to pick the right depth. That really is the most important thing about fishing for F1s is depth. It really is crucial. What you'll find this time of year, the fish will sit at a certain level. Now, if you can find that level and fish on the bottom at that level, it's a great head start. I've been fishing tunnel the last couple of weeks and I know the fish at the moment are between 3 and 3.5 foot. So what you can actually do, instead of putting a plummet on and plumbing your rig, is to set your float at 3 to 3.5 foot and find that depth, rather than actually looking for a depth with a plummet. So I've set my float at 3.5 foot because that's the depth I caught in last week on house pool. I've plumbed my peg up and I've found a nice little flat spot at exactly 3.5 foot. Now that's a great way of starting for me. We're going to be fishing with maggots, my #1 go-to bait, and what we're going to actually be doing is just tapping in a few maggots to start the day off. We're not really going to prime up any limes. You don't really need to this time of year. A lot of the time the fish will be sat in your peg, and if you start off at the right depth, you will barely need to feed at all. Maybe 8 or 10 maggots, count them out of your pot and start fishing. So like I said, I've got my rig set at 3.5 foot. I've plumbed up correctly and I found a nice little flat spot. We're fishing on this peg, 3.5 foot is at 14.5 meters, which brings me on to what pole I'm using. Today I've chose to use a Definition XS at 14.5 metres. Now this pole is incredible. It's at about the £600–700 mark, and it is just an absolute dream to use. I'm using it today at 14.5 metres, and it's just really light and stiff, but the number one thing about it is ultra strong. So you can chuck it about on venues like this, you can catch big fish and you've got no worries. So what I'm going to do first of all, my number one bait to start the day off on the hook is double maggot. I like to use red maggots at this time of year so they don't show up too much on the bottom. I feel like if you're going to feed white maggots, the fish would be a little bit tentative coming over the top of them. So we're going to start with red maggots with just an odd white maggot flicked in between. I'm going to put some maggots into my little sprinkle pot. We're going to shift over to 14.5 metres, where I know I've pre-plumbed up. And what we're going to do is we're just going to tap in and actually count the maggots into the water out of the pot. So I'm going to turn my pot over, just tap in the pole, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now that's a great way of starting your peg off, just 10 maggots. Flick your rig in out to the side so you get a nice slow drop, and just try and hold the float as still as possible. I'm using a back shot today, which makes it a little bit easier, and just really concentrate on trying to hold that float as still as possible and make your hook bait sink as slow as possible. Well, there you go. Look how quick that was. It really is unbelievable how just 8 or 10 maggots can be enough bait to attract F1s into your peg. But what you'll find with venues like this, that the fish are automatically in your peg because it's very narrow. Only a small F1, but a nice start. What you'll find, the fish are automatically in your peg. You're not trying to draw them in with bait. You're just trying to feed the right amount of bait to get one bite and repeat the process. So just a small F1, but a nice way of starting. That one was properly on the bottom, a real positive bite, which is now showing me that I'm probably fishing in the right depth. And again, we're just going to repeat the process. Just top my maggots up. And what you can actually do, once you get into the flow of fishing and you know how long it takes to get a bite, once you've tapped in your 10 maggots and you've sat there for 2 or 3 minutes and you've gone past the point where you know you are most likely to get a bite, what you can actually do is lift your rig back out and repeat the process again. I'm putting 40 to 50 maggots in my pot, but only tapping in 10 at a time, which allows me to be able to feed 3 or 4 times once my rig's out there. On the hardest of days, what you'll find, you might have to feed 2 or 3 times to create an indication. That both times we've fed now, we've had an indication. The first one we foul hooked, the second one was perfect. So what we're going to do, just tap in 10 maggots, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then we're going to lay the rig out to the side. Fully out to the side, lay it in, and just watch that float on the drop the whole way down, just holding it as still as possible. The back shot really does help with this. You can just drop that back shot down onto the surface of the water and that just holds the flow nice and still. That's another fish. That was off the bottom. I think that's just a small fish. But it just shows we're getting fish into our peg and getting indications all the time. A little skimmer. It's not a bad thing. If you get a few of these in your peg, a lot of the time that can attract some of the bigger F1s as well. Now I know I've only fed 10 maggots then, and I know I had 40 to 50 in my pot. So a lot of the time you won't need to top up your pot. You can just go, literally just go straight back out and carry on fishing. It really is an efficient way of fishing. So 10 maggots. First thing you do once you get out to the distance that you're fishing is tap your bait in, 2, 3, 10, they come out quite quick. And flick your rig into the side and hold it directly on top of where those maggots hit the surface of the water. Well, there you go. It really is incredible just how quickly just 8 or 10 maggots going through your peg can get F1s into your peg. We've started off with just 10 maggots and just repeated the process, and we've had a bite virtually every chuck. And now what I have done today is actually, I feel now the depth I'm fishing in is the right depth. Since that first one we lost, we haven't lost any. So I know 3.5 foot is the right depth. Now what you can actually do is find that same depth in the margins. So I'm going to find that I've plumbed up the same depth in the margin. I'm going to prime it just a touch with just a few maggots out of my hand. And hopefully later, at later stages in the matches, you can go in and have a really good run on that line. Now what I am going to do now, I'm just going to put this one back in the keep net. I'm going to stop fishing for a couple of minutes and just take you through the rig I'm using. Right, we'll start at the very bottom end of the rig. First of all, a size 20 F1 finesse hook. And these are a great hook for this time of year. Very light, very sharp, Teflon coated, which is important. With the water being clear, you don't want a shiny hook. You want something black and Teflon coated. To an 010 MVR hook length line. And 010 this time of year is perfect really. You're still going to hook an odd carp like we have done today, and 010 is still plenty enough to get it out. It's durable in the landing net for the bigger F1s, but still light enough to catch all your fish. I've gone for a 5-inch hook length for this time of year. I feel that that's about the right length. We can fish down the middle with this length, or we can fish up in 3.5 foot. It doesn't matter where you're fishing, I would always use a 5-inch hook length this time of year. Right, the float I'm going to use today is a 0.2 Maver MVR finesse float. But the reason why I'm using that float is because of the amount of shot it takes. Right at the double loop to loop of the hook length, I'm starting off with a number 10 shot, followed by 3 more number 10 shots. So we've just got 4 number 10 shot at the bottom of the rig. I've spaced them out 3 inches apart. Now this will give you just a nice slow drop through the water, but not too slow. You'll catch in danger of catching roach and skimmers and stuff like that. So it's quite bottom heavy, but still strung out in the bottom bit. Going up to the float, like I said before, an MVR Finesse 6, 0.2. I feel like a 0.2 with that amount of shot is about right for 3.5 foot of water. It settles at the right speed for me. Just above that, I've got 1 number 9 back shot. Today, I've picked a peg with the wind off my back, so it's not too much of a problem. But what if I had the wind side on, what I can actually do with that back shot is just move it up to within 5 or 6 inches of the pole tip and just double it up as well to make it heavier. So if it's flat calm, what I can actually do is just move it close to the float and have my pole just above my float. Or if it's windy, I can adjust the back shot and move it up a touch nearer the pole tip. It makes it a little bit more stable when the wind comes side on. The elastic I'm using is what I use all for F1 fishing this time of year. I wouldn't ever think about using a different elastic. It's the 6 to 9 dual core. I'm using it through a long top kit today because I know there is quite a few carp in this area, and the last thing I want to be doing is using a short top kit, hooking a 4 or 5 pound carp, bottom me out and breaking the 010. The pot I'm using is just a general kinder pot with a sprinkle lid. The most important thing about the pot is that you get the holes the right size so that you can go out to your position where you're fishing, tap in maggots with your pole and count the amount of maggots going in. That's so important. You want consistency with your feeding. Today, 8 to 10 maggots is about right, and that pot I can do that perfectly with. The only one last thing that I want to touch on is one of the most important things about the rig. The 4 number 10 shot at the bottom is to make the bait sink and get down to the level that the fish are at. The back shot is to hold the float still. One of the most important things is I do actually just trim the bristle down with number 12 stops. And what I do is I position them just underneath the float. When I drop my rig into the side, what can happen, the rig, when it's this light, can get caught up in the surface tension. With those two number 12 stots just below the float, it just breaks it and makes sure the float settles every single time. Probably the most important bit about the rig. But all round, a really nicely balanced rig. 010, 016, a 6 to 9 hollow elastic, long top kit, a nice kinder pot, a nice finesse float, perfect for F1s in the winter months. One great little tip that I've learnt over the last couple of years is that even in the colder months, the edges, the margins are really not to be ignored. We've got a very similar depth in the edge to a cross. So what I try and do is imagine it as more of another across line rather than a margin line. In summer, you expect the fish just to come in the margins in the very late parts of the match. But on venues like this, on commercials like this, sometimes maybe after an hour, hour and a half, it's worth just a quick look in the edges in a very similar depth to what we've been fishing in across. So I've fished virtually exactly the same rig. Obviously a little bit of a shorter pole, but down to the next pallet can be a great line. So we're going to feed it exactly the same. Tap in my few maggots with the sprinkle pot, count them out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to go for 8 to 10 maggots. Flick my rig in exactly the same as what we're doing across. Drop my back shot in. I control that float and just try and keep it as still as possible. Just try and imagine an F1 watching that bait the whole way down. So we've just had a little indication straight away then. So there is a sign of a fish there. So we're just going to try and be patient because we're not looking for loads of bites today. And in general, if you do catch in the edges and the margins, sometimes they can be bigger fish. And there we go. That was just on the drop. I flicked my rig out. A real fast bite. But it just shows you the margins can't be ignored. And the great thing about fishing in the margins, you're normally fishing a bit shorter. So when you are fishing across at early stages in the matches, you can just pick 5 or 6 maggots up, flick them in there and really try and prime your lines up. Again, like we did before, we found the depth across. Getting to know a venue is really important because you get to know what depth the fish are in. There we go, real decent fish, which is what tends to happen in the margins. So you don't need loads of fish when you're fishing in the margins. And there you go, a great big tunnel barn F1. And that seems to be the stamp of the fish you catch in the edges. So you don't need many fish at all. So you can just pop a few maggots in, be really nice and patient, and it really can be a game changer, a match winning line. Well, there you go guys. We've started across, we've ended up in the margins, we've kept it really simple. We found the depth that the fish want to be at. We've just tapped in a little bit of bait, which is so deadly important at this time of year. The fish don't want to eat masses of bait. Just tapped in some maggots in the right depth, used the right float, and we've caught a really nice bag of fish. The great thing about fishing like this is that you can do it in numerous bits of your peg. You can start across doing it, you can do it short, you can do it in the margins. If you use light floats and sensible tackle, you never got to worry about losing the fish. And there you go, another F1 in the bag. Well, I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. Get out there on the bank and give it a go for yourself. Before you go guys, make sure you subscribe to our channel, give us a like, and don't forget to hit the notification bell.